What does it mean to be a multidimensional being?
Unity consciousness, understanding we are all interconnected to each other, to all of life.
Are we really ascending to higher dimensions of consciousness? Or is that ascension really a descent into our own bodies?
I absolutely believe that. It's an inside job. If we haven't done the inner work, it becomes spiritual bypass. It's not sustainable. It's not fully grounded.
Are the experiences occurring in our world here to support our ascension into the 6D frequencies?
To have cleared much of the debris and illusion from our psyche.
Perhaps it's finally time to operate out of our full genetic potential.
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is SIMRAN. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, SIMRAN.
It's quite apparent that we have created a world that is filled with pain, with violence, and distress. Perhaps there's been enough of that challenge to reclaim our birthright, to consider rising to a higher frequency and operate out of our full genetic potential. It's time to rise into the higher dimensions of our own consciousness. We've already been through a millennia of dimensional descent, and it's likely that we don't even know much of that story or what the planet was like before that descent. But now's the time, according to Judith Corvin-Blackburn, where we have entered a transitionary stage of this reclamation journey, a journey that will ultimately restore peace, love, and justice globally, and create a vibrant world where all beings can thrive. People around the globe are waking up. This is from the book, The 6D Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA. Judith Corvin-Blackburn is an award-winning author, internationally known teacher, transpersonal psychotherapist, and shamanic minister who for over 50 years has inspired people to step into joy, purpose, and inner authority, reclaiming their true soul nature so that collectively we can transform planet Earth into the loving, peaceful, creative place it is meant to be. Welcome, Judith, to 1111 Talk Radio.
Thank you so much, Simran.
Dimensionality. There's some misunderstanding as to what that really means and whether or not the world continues to exist in the same way or if it actually is altered. Can you express about 6D, and is that simultaneously being experienced along with 3D, 4D, 5D?
Yes, we can experience all these frequencies. The image that came to me when I was writing Activating Your 5D Frequency was that the dimensions are like Russian nesting dolls. We hold all of those. Our 3D body inside holds the frequencies of the first and second dimension, and then the fourth, fifth, sixth, and at least up to the ninth surround us, each doll getting a little bit larger. From my perspective, we are going from being 3D, 4D humans. The fourth dimension we bring in through the right hemisphere of the brain. It holds our emotions. It holds our creativity. It's the feminine or the yin side. It also, however, because it holds the emotions, it also holds trauma and unprocessed feelings from trauma and other life challenges. And part of being able to get into these higher frequencies, to get those nesting dolls working more frequently, is to heal a lot of that emotional trauma, the emotional energy, and simultaneously work with our shadow, which we've been taught to pretend doesn't exist. I mean, there's a whole sort of gamut of what we're being asked to process through, which then opens us up to becoming fifth and sixth dimensional humans, which I do believe we are designed to be. essential qualities of the fifth dimension are unconditional love of self. I like to emphasize that because a lot of people hear that, oh, yeah, I can love others unconditionally. We also have to love ourselves unconditionally. Unbridled creativity, unity consciousness, understanding we are all interconnected to each other, to all of life, which is everywhere. And it moves us through releasing judgment and those energies that keep us small and keep our gifts covered up. The sixth dimension is also known as the quantum field. Plato called it the world of forms. This is not a new idea, but it holds every quality, object, representation of objects, anything we can think or imagine has a energetic configuration, an energy configuration in the sixth dimension. And that is really how we create reality from. However, since the dimensional descent, which probably started about 10 or 11 millenniums ago and keeps getting progressively more intense before we reverse it, which we're being called to do now. What we've been doing during the dimensional descent, for the most part, is creating unconsciously. So we're not aware when we create pain and suffering. It doesn't have to be this way. We have the power to choose a new reality. And if enough of us are tuned in, it's similar to social media. If it gets enough hits to create a peaceful, loving world, it will show up in 3D.
I think the reason that I love your book so much is because it's finally a resource for individuals that really helps them understand the necessity of going through themselves rather than an ascension, a fantasy ascension up above and out of themselves. What you describe in this book is a path that I took, and it was a real embrace of the shadow, an embrace of the animal that is my body, an embrace even of the monster that I met inside or the inner demons that were so deeply hidden. It resulted in what was true unconditional love of self. So I love that you brought that up. Is that the doorway of humanity to divinity when we take that walk?
Oh, I love that phrase, SIMRAN. Yes, I think that's a perfect way to say it. It is the doorway, and it's an important walk. Brings tears to my eyes to hear your journey with it, because clearly you fully embraced it and then came through the doorway. Yes, very much.
If we really look at a lot of the things that have happened in our world and even the experiences of recent events, which just have created even more polarity, it's almost as if we must do this degree of descension into our own bodies in order to grasp the frequencies, absorb the frequencies that are higher, which rest in compassion and unconditional love and tenderness and gentleness and all those things that we can't possibly give others until we give them to ourselves. Is that what's going to heal our world?
I absolutely believe that. It's an inside job. And essentially, we can open to a lot of spiritual information, but if we haven't done the inner work, it becomes spiritual bypass. It's not sustainable. It's not fully grounded if we don't embody it. We've really been programmed to believe that we're not supposed to do that. Part of that walk, if you will, is releasing the old programming, having the courage for many to not understand us and to do this inner work, ideally with a lot of support around us. And there's a lot of support out there to help people with this because it can be scary and it can be hard. As that happens, because we're all interconnected, and we heal ourselves, we open to more consciousness, more joy. Those 12 more strands of our DNA fire up to bring more of the light in. The world shifts.
That's not just the wounding, the story, the conditioning that came from the beliefs of those before us and what we soaked up. Is it also pseudo-positivity movement? I'll just affirm it away, or I'm going to go manifest something else because I am creator of my reality and I just don't have to think about that stuff. Talk a little bit about that bypassing the fine line between where spirituality meets motivational space.
Yes, and that's a hard dance, especially if people aren't embodied. I try to look at light polarization. You're really only doing half the work. And without the other half, you topple. You don't have that real foundation. It serves a purpose, perhaps, to have that as another portal or another entryway. But ideally, people that are doing these affirmations, they understand the power of our consciousness, and then they have more work to do. The next step is to go inside because, again, it's not sustainable. It's not fully authentic until it gets to the point we can open and walk through that doorway authentically.
What makes your book so powerful is the fact that you are a psychotherapist. You've also had that shamanic training, star seeds and galactic consciousness and those sorts of things. One of the words that is also misinterpreted is the word ascension.
I do think it's a word that tends to be misinterpreted. My version of ascension, we become more and more multidimensional in the way, I spoke into before. And what that does is it allows more light to literally fill our cells, which speeds up our frequency, opens our heart. I used to say when I taught about it, it wasn't about going up, it was about going out or speeding up. I think that's the phrase I used. It's not about leaving our lives. It's about expanding what our life really is, expanding how we perceive things, expanding our perceptual bandwidth. So we live in the bigger picture while still being grounded, while still understanding. Things will come up within us that will still need to be addressed because we're human. So we still have to deal with the polarity, but we deal with it from a different place.
I'd like to talk a little bit about those words, perceptual bandwidth. As I did my own deep dive, which extended over many years, I met 3 different aspects within myself. One that was the identity, personality, the ego that lives out in the world and often stems from the wounded child trying to overcompensate for that wounded child so it becomes something. The second self, a lowercase self, is that shadow, animal, monster, inner demon self that is seemingly seen as the villain, but is actually the ally once we recognize it. And the third is our full humanity, the embrace of all of our emotions, and that wholeness of the 3 is actually what comprises the wisdom of the higher self and the wholeness of the self. In that journey, what I came to was that these 3 parts of me are not parts I have to transcend. They are actually parts I have to be present to because they exist all the time at the same time. But I need to be present to which one is activated in the moment. So when you talk about the perceptual bandwidth, what I heard you say felt more like an external view of perceptual bandwidth. Is there also an internal perceptual bandwidth that we need to hold as we rise into 6D?
Well, I do believe that part of that, an essential part of that perceptual bandwidth, is to be able to observe the self, very much like you described. Our ego isn't going to go away. Our shadow is not going to go away. As we become more and more whole, we're being asked to observe when the ego pops up, when the shadow pops up, and have tools to work with it so that they stay in right relationship to us. One of the images that I like is that we don't allow the ego or the shadow to be in the driver's seat. We have our full selves, our soul, our spirit in the driver's seat, and we have the rest of them in the passenger or back seat as seems appropriate. They don't go away, but we shift our relationship with them. I think that expanded bandwidth is what helps people pull that relationship into its proper place.
Yes, it's almost like for much of our lives, we're letting the others take the wheel and kind of dragging the soul and the spirit along on that agenda journey. Through the inner work, there comes a point where instead all of those other selves kneel to the higher self or the soul and say, how can I serve?
Yes. And we take charge of them in that process. As you talked about with the ego, the wounded inner child often is running the show before we enter this process. To be able to recognize and identify who's taking charge and who needs to get out of the driver's seat and into the back seat is really an important piece. I always tell my clients, write a new job description for them, which is another way, when you talked about they become allies, they all can serve their purpose. The ego can help us stay safe if it's seeing clearly or if we help it to see clearly. The shadow is essential because if we don't have a positive and a authentic relationship with our shadow, it goes underground and can create a lot of hassle for us as individuals and for what we may unconsciously project onto others, which creates harm.
There's other languaging within the book. The ego or the escapist part of ourselves can latch onto and manipulate into our own means. Clarify these words: star DNA, star seeds, Ka body, all of these parts that then seem so much bigger than us to our human mind, but actually point us to the universe that exists within us.
I can only speak to the way I vision it. To be a starseed means that you have memories and experiences in star civilizations that your soul has probably incarnated there for the first time. We've experienced living in a peaceful, loving world where our creativity is used to create more and more and more support and positive experiences. For the starseeds here now, I believe we've come, each of us, with our own mission to help participate in raising the frequency of humans on the planet. We're like the pioneers, we're the way showers to say, hey, wait a minute, it can be done. And there's like millions of us, which is so exciting. So in my work, it's to help people that begin to know, wait, I sort of have this sense about myself, or maybe I have memories, for instance, of high consciousness places or civilizations on the earth, like Lemuria and Atlantis, and a lot of the indigenous cultures. I think there are far more than we know yet. People are getting more and more flashes of memory of when it worked really well so that we can model that. We can work within ourselves, get ourselves to the point to connect with others where we model this to help people go, oh, wait a minute, we've been told this is impossible, but it's not.
Is it our own evolution that has gotten us more awakened and aware of these things?
This is an evolutionary imperative. We're being pushed from within. Our souls are saying, okay, now's the time.
Do you feel like these gifts that we're taking on are a memory of these different starseed lives or places that we come from? Or is what's happening right now about timing and the universe?
These are memories that are coming up because we're clearing out. If there was no programming, and by programming I mean we're born into families, cultural institutions that say to us in their own ways, this is what you're supposed to believe. And if you don't believe that, or if you expand beyond that, you're considered worthy of exile. Let's put it that way. Breaking through, becoming aware, wait a second, whoa, that's just a very narrow view of reality. It's only one little reality that our 3D selves have created. Once you get that, then I think these things begin to arise in many ways organically. But it doesn't mean that it's easy for people.
People are waking up to a new awareness of who, as humans, we really are. And although we are often in a state of collective discomfort as we struggle to keep our balance, release old paradigm beliefs, and commit to being ever more loving, conscious, and co-creative, this collective awakening is heartening news. This is from Judith Corvin-Blackburn's book, The 6D Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA. In Chapter 1, she gives you more background and understanding of where we've been and where we're going in this evolutionary process. She then moves on to express the 9D vertical axis and how you can consciously use its wisdom to release victim consciousness and take full responsibility for what you create. Through this book, you will deepen your experience of sacred geometry and light languages to help expand your perceptual bandwidth and deepen your connection to universal wisdom. And then you'll discover a little bit about time, how you can understand it and utilize various aspects of it. As a transpersonal psychotherapist, Judith guides clients into the personal empowerment needed to become fully aligned to their soul potential. And then you transition to a joyful new world to connect with this planet that we all deserve to live on, where the pain and trauma of current life in 3D becomes a thing of the past. Again, the book is The 6D Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA, which has just released, and it is also available on audiobook. And the website again is empoweringthespirit.com. Join my Substack. My publication is Beyond the Illusion, and you can find it at iamsimran1111.substack.com. That link is in the bio description. You'll actually receive all of the 1111 magazine issues on audio as part of that, in addition to the weekly prompt, inquiry, contemplation, and meditation that I provide to all of the subscribers on the annual membership. That link is in the bio description. We'll be right back after these messages.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. SIMRAN is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at iamsimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
I really enjoy working individually with people. If you're looking for some additional support and guidance, and you really want to dive into the subtle, then there are quite a few options on my website at iamsimran.com that have to do with shadow work or manifestation if you want a more focused approach on a particular thing, as well as individual sessions around deciphering signs, symbols, and synchronicities, gaining a better understanding of how the universe is speaking to you, your particular dialect. That link is in the bio description. Light codes are embedded in these 10 DNA strands, and many of us have now begun to reactivate them. These codes, which are currently being amplified from the photons hitting our planet, hold incredible talents and gifts, including empathy, telepathy, and clairvoyance. They are our passage to full empowerment and our co-creative abilities, as well as to cosmic wisdom. They allow us to expand the bandwidth of our perception so we can plug into its higher wisdom and experience reality in a way that allows us to both see and live in a much bigger, more conscious picture. This is from Judith Corvin-Blackburn's book, The 6D Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA. Be sure to look up her YouTube channel, Wisdom Within Us, where she shares the meditations from this book. In addition, you can go to her website and find out more about an online book launch for the 6D Ascension Journey, Sunday, October 12th. There's also a book signing in Sylva, North Carolina at City Lights Bookstore, October 4th. And Judith starts her next online class, a 4-week Zoom class titled Embracing Your Starseed Nature, and that begins on November 2nd. Judith Corvin-Blackburn is the author of 4 books, Activating Your 5D Frequency, Empowering the Spirit, Journey to Wholeness, and now the 6D Ascension Journey. She offers online and Zoom classes to empower one's spirit, activate higher frequency and starseed potential, as well as a global shamanic multidimensional mystery school. And the website again is empoweringthespirit.com.
The more empathic we become, the more it asks that we really get clear with what we're feeling, which was the 4D sort of portal we talked about in the last segment. Before you can fully walk through those higher frequency doors, one has to be conscious of basically how we've been programmed and where we've been. As we open and that more and more DNA starts firing up or going online, if you will, then these things just come to us. The other thing that tends to happen, although sometimes it's slow for people, is that we begin to connect with other like-minded people and get that support. However, my point about the empaths is when you get empathic enough that you can feel everyone's pain, that's a pretty big lesson to learn how to begin to separate out. Because we don't help the planet, we don't help others by sinking into their pain. That just brings us down, lowers our frequency so that we're unable really to effectively change anything. Piece of that's so important about empathy is it helps us become more and more compassionate. It helps us open our heart more and more, which does help all those who are suffering. It's only really helpful if I don't take the suffering on in a way that pulls me down. And I think people are struggling a lot with that. A lot of the fear that's being injected essentially into all of the media, just fear of everything changing and people don't know what that's like. So that there's a whole fear frequency that's sort of in the collective atmosphere of the planet. Well, we don't want to become empaths where we feel that fear and become immobilized by it. We want to acknowledge it, we want to understand it, and we want to be able to not take that on. So having really clear boundaries is hugely important for empaths. And again, more and more and more of us are becoming more empathic. Some people can do that more easily than others. It's a dance. It is also how you may well need help along the way with this.
I want to clarify the distinction between empathic sensitivity and empathy from what you just said. So the one that gets sucked under is that empathic sensitivity that is leaning more towards a shadow side of self-obsession, where you're utilizing yourself and really making it about you, even though it's about others. And then true empathy is actually service, where you make it about transmuting instead of taking on.
That's really interesting. I'd not thought about it, certainly with the words that you used, but I certainly think that's a good way to say it. When you do that, is it just really so self-focused? I think it's part of the old programming, is what it really is, that the way to serve is to suffer. The way to serve is to give ourselves up. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to understand we are part of this gigantic hologram of creation, and the more joy we can allow into our lives, the more emotional and spiritual health we can allow into our lives, and which means into ourselves, really, the more that's the way to help everyone.
When it comes to empathy, I would think that most of us are capable of empathy, but may not fully tap into it based on our wounds. With that said, most people are probably empathic, but if they've not gone through their own shadows and healing, then they won't be able to feel that fully. Do you feel like empathy is part of that doorway that humanity bridges to divinity?
I hadn't thought about it in terms of those words, Simran, but yes, it's a great way to describe it. Then again, learning how to support positive empathy. You might find a lovely phrase for that, where it's useful. I'm going to call it useful empathy. How's that? Where it really supports a loving frequency. You talked about the transmuting, which I think is a beautiful word, helps us transmute the pain and suffering.
Part of the beauty of this book is that it has the elevated consciousness and conversation about our starseed potential, how we can rise to these higher octaves and soul nature. but yet it comes at it from that very therapeutic psychoanalyst type of way in which you've given us questions, in which you've taken us through certain processes or meditations. It feels very practically woven. Can you speak about the approach to this book?
There are thousands of us teachers around the planet, as you well know, right? Not only are you part of that, but you interview all numerous people. And we all have our own particular gifts. And for me, because I've been a therapist since the mid 70s, I really understand the human psyche. In my undergraduate college days, I started off as a psychology major. I did want to be a psychologist. We didn't have the term psychotherapist back in the early 60s. Actually, what really happened, because I was at a small women's college, and the psychology department had 4 professors, the head of which made a comment in a class I took from him that made me go, I'm not staying in this department. The college was building a new campus and they wanted to have an experimental psychology lab. And the head of the department, this guy, that sort of classic, we'd call him toxic male these days, he said, I turned it down because you're all just here to get married. I went, that's it. I'm going to major in English, where I learned more about the psyche, frankly, than I would have in the psychology classes.
The step that we're all definitely in right now, moving from that codependence to independence and really learning how to take care of self. How do you speak about it within the context of this book?
This is an essential part. And it is something that develops, again, I think somewhat organically as we work with the shadow, as we work with our childhood wounds, other lifetime traumas. It is being able to trust the self. As we do that inner work, we have cleared much of the debris and illusion from our psyche. Self-trust, that's essential. And we can't do it until we clear a lot of the wounding, at least put our toe through that walkway that you talked about. One of my books is Empowering the Spirit, which is very much focused on helping people step into a new level of empowerment, kind of a workbook, more so than my last 2 books, including the 60 Ascension journey. The whole focus was that when we allow our spirit to lead, when we really honor the stirrings of our soul, that allows us to step into a greater and greater level of empowerment. And initially, I was not going to write specifically about it with this book. When you have an empowered populace that has cleared much of the wounding and has developed that inner relationship, basically that walk you've spoken into, we can't be controlled or manipulated, and we have no desire to have to one up someone else, to have to compete. We all know we have our own little flame of divinity, and all we're really asked to do is shine that.
That sounds like a real maturity that takes place on the outside, a level of mastery that's external while also internal. You speak about spiritual adulthood. Is that mastery and maturity on the internal?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that's not aligned in the internal is not, again, sustainable or authentic on the external. I do want to say that the phrase spiritual adulthood comes from Carolyn Mace. She talked about that, I think, in her Anatomy of the Spirit, which it's probably almost a 30-year-old book at this point. But it's a very important concept. It includes stepping into emotional maturity, because when we're emotionally mature, we interact with ourselves and others in quite a different way, and open to this spiritual adulthood where we take responsibility. Understand we create things, and sometimes we create things because we're really good students and we want a hard curriculum, and sometimes we create them because we didn't realize we were doing it.
It seems to me that the polarity on the outside, the darkness, sheds light on the polarity and darkness on the inside, that the divisiveness that we witness externally can illuminate divisiveness within our own minds. Do you feel like the challenge, the chaos, the darkness that we're experiencing right now is also serving us in terms of this mastery, spiritual adulthood, maturity, self-empowerment, and also ascension?
Yes. As much as I wish we didn't have to go through it, it 100% serves a purpose. The purpose ultimately is that we can hold compassion, that we understand all beings deserve compassion. We may not agree with what's happening. We may not agree with the way they maneuver in the world, the harm that seems to be caused, but they are us. This is a piece on a personal level, have to come back to this over and over again, which is I've got to find it within me to change it. And when I do, and enough of us do that collectively, then we disempower the dark from doing harm.
And so as we look at these different dimensions, and you talk about the 90 vertical axis, which came from Barbara Handclau's work.
Yes.
Are we to activate our star DNA, or is it automatically being activated? And what is that?
I think it's automatically being activated. However, I think people can resist in a way. I don't know exactly what happens energetically when you do that, but a lot of this polarity is people being scared and that not knowing how to relate to the dark externally or internally. We shift the harm that the dark does. We don't get rid of the dark. There's always the light and the dark. It's a dance, but it doesn't have to do harm. It can just be when we get attached to being right, thinking our way is the only way that's light, we actually feed the dark. And that's a hard concept for people to understand, but it's just the way it is. When we can look at the external dark and go, okay, we're creating this, and there are players, that are prime actors in the process that we can love to hate, so to speak. But wait a second, they're inside of us too. So when we can find that and send it love and gently give it a new job description, if you will, that's what's really going to change the energy around this.
It really is about mastering ourselves at the mental, emotional level, and then finding neutrality amidst the people, places, and things that show up.
Yes. And I love the term, as you probably know, because it's in the book a fair amount, loving neutrality. And that's when we're in those higher frequencies, that comes naturally. And I do think those DNA strands are expressing naturally as we do the work.
Are individuals becoming more awake and aware to sacred geometry and light language because of this activation of star DNA?
Yes. And this light language is fascinating to me. I do write about an experience I had many years ago in the book before I'd ever heard that term. It's funny because lately I have found myself singing songs in this language that does not exist on this planet, or just sort of spontaneously, like I walk daily and just kind of spontaneously hearing myself talking in this because it's vibrational, is what it is. There are people that understand content of the light language more and more. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I do think it's coming up, and it's coming up again for many people. They may not think about it or even think to call it anything. Sacred geometry is so near and dear my heart. In all transparency, I didn't know much about it before I started writing this book. And then I had to learn because I knew sacred geometry was a key factor in the sixth dimension. And I took a few wonderful courses from this dear woman, Nadi Hanna, who taught sacred geometry by having us draw it. And that allowed us to get it sort of like fully embodied in it. And I listened to a lovely course on Gaia about it too, which gave me some more cognitive pieces. What sacred geometry, it's this universal language. It allows us to communicate with Source.
And are these pieces and parts of our own sacred architecture as souls or light beings?
Well, it's not a word that I've used, but as you use it, what I understand it to mean is we understand everything is energy. In the sixth dimension, all that energy is in geometric configurations. We also hold sacred geometry in our physical bodies. We exist in this geometric configuration in the sixth dimension, as does everything else that you can imagine. As we expand our perception, we're able to see that and feel that more and more and understand more and more how that connects everything.
Is all of that somehow taking us back to the memories, the miscreations, the activations that all came from ancient societies, from Lemuria, from Atlantis, from ancient Egypt, from the great star nations? You have a lot about these in the book. Why is that all important right now?
Well, again, they give us models. What happened to me when I was in Egypt and how I realized, even before I had some of these terms, that the very, very ancient Egyptians, 10,000, 11,000 years ago, who probably were taught from the Atlanteans that got out before Atlantis or while Atlantis was crashing. And I saw that they were operating, even the hieroglyphs were very different. And they were simpler because they held different frequency. They held a higher consciousness frequency. As the years, millenniums went on, then you started having, it was no longer the priests and priestesses, then it was the kings and that whole patriarchal piece that began. So this happened way before the pharaohs. The society had already begun dimensional descent once the pharaohs came in, and then it kept going down from there. And you can see the hieroglyphs get more complicated because our ability to pick up on that sort of simple hieroglyphs and know what that means, people no longer had those abilities. The other piece I want to say, because I think it's really important, I do believe that while these ancient civilizations, both on our planet and in star civilizations, model important pieces for us, we're also going to be creating something new, probably something that hasn't existed in the universe before. Because of the dimensional descent, we have gone down into narrowing ourselves, shutting down the DNA that really supports us and supports loving life. In that process and going through the kind of suffering that most, if not all, humans have experienced, we've developed the ability to have another level of compassion, I think. And that begins to open as we go through this evolutionary process.
There really is a depth of knowledge, wisdom, and support throughout this book, and it's filled with questions. There are meditations that support. It seems as if it is equally for the novice that is really wanting to deep dive into all of these areas, or the seeker that has been studying for a long time. What is the why that an individual might need this book right now?
Well, I feel it's a good support because I do understand the human psyche. I've been able to, I think, give some pretty usable tools. There's some comfort in that book. I know when I started the editing process, which got me reading it, at the very beginning, I was at a time I was very upset about what was going on in our world. And when I started reading it, I'm like, oh, good, this makes me feel so much better. So we're going to go in and out of slipping into the old ways, if you will. So it helped me at that moment. I thought, oh, good, it must help people if it could help me because I couldn't remember all the things I had written. And the other thing I know SIMRAN, is that books have energy. And I do believe the energy that comes through. I don't consider myself a channel, really. I'm more a downloader, but what comes through is not me personally. It is what I've been allowed to pull in and share in order to fulfill my own mission.
So whether you are the novice or the seeker that has been studying for decades, I want you to pick up your copy of the 6D Ascension Journey. Think about transformation. People all over the planet stepping up to shine, reclaiming consciousness around the globe, coming forward with a frequency so powerful, so loving, that old forces could not stop them. What if we all held a common vision of a world where all beings are valued, where we honor the divine spark within, where dormant strands of DNA are reactivated, and where our manifestation prowess is utilized for the good of all? Let us hold this vision amidst all that arises and do the work required to live from this level of dimensional experience, expression, and essence. This is from Judith Corvin-Blackburn's latest book, The 6D Ascension Journey, Activating the Light Codes in Our 12-Strand DNA. You can find out more at empoweringthespirit.com. Connect to her YouTube channel for the meditations, Wisdom Within Us, and also check out her other books, Activating Your 5D Frequency, Empowering the Spirit, Journey to Wholeness, and the 6D Ascension Journey. Thank you so much, Judith, for being on 1111 Talk Radio and for your vast body of work and the loving service heart to which you pour into everything that you have created. It has been a joy to have you on.
And it's been a joy to be on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending time. If you're looking for some additional support and guidance, and you really want to dive into the subtle, then there are quite a few options on my website at IamSimran.com that have to do with shadow work or manifestation if you want a more focused approach on a particular thing, as well as individual sessions around deciphering signs, symbols, and synchronicities, gaining a better understanding of how the universe is speaking to you, your particular dialect. That link is in the bio description. Until next week, I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.